Feel like, I'm another singer, another guitar player. Well, I would tell them to pick cotton for a few days and then call me.
When you've lived as long and as boldly as Willie Nelson, you start to think differently about how your story should end. Now, at 92, the country icon is opening up about his funeral in a way only he can. Honest, reflective, music, and surprisingly direct. But what's catching everyone off guard isn't just how he wants to be remembered. It's the people he's made clear he doesn't want present music when that day comes. These choices aren't fueled by bitterness or headlines. They're rooted in something much deeper. And as Willie explains his reasoning, it offers a revealing glimpse into the values that have guided him all along. The early days of Willie. Willie Nelson's story begins in Abbott, Texas on April 29, 1933. At least that's the date most people agree on, thanks to a late-night paperwork mix-up at the hospital. There's been lifelong confusion about whether he was technically born before or after midnight. Instead of stressing over it, Willie did what he always does. He turned it into a celebration and made his birthday a two-day event every year. He was born to Myle and Ira Nelson, two teenagers music trying to survive during the Great Depression, a time when just getting by felt like a daily battle. Willie was their second child, music, and money was always tight. His father, Ira, bounced around Texas looking for mechanic work wherever he could find it, while his mother was often left alone, isolated and struggling under the weight of it all. When work dried up, the fallback was cotton picking, long, brutal days music in the fields. Even as a young boy, Willie understood exactly what that life looked like, and he knew he didn't want it. Music quickly became more than a hobby. It became his escape plan. Heartbreak entered Willie's life early. Two events shaped him long before he was old enough to understand their full impact. His parents divorced when he was still an infant, and not long after that. His mother left entirely. His father eventually remarried, but Willie and his sister Bobby were sent to live with their paternal grandparents instead. As painful as that separation was, it ended up changing his life for the better. His grandparents became his foundation. They encouraged him to sing in church, nurtured his love for music, and gave him something that would define the rest of his life. His first guitar, along with the sheet music he needed to teach himself how to play. Years later, Willie would recall his very first time performing in front of an audience. He was only 5 or 6 years old, standing on stage reciting a poem with a surprising amount of attitude for a kid that age. Dressed in a spotless white sailor suit music with red trim, he was so nervous that he started picking his nose, which led to a nosebleed that ruined the outfit. It was awkward, messy, and unforgettable. An early hint that the stage was where his life would unfold, flaws and all. Around that same time, music. His grandfather bought him his first guitar. Not long after, tragedy struck. His grandfather, a blacksmith with a powerful singing voice and an even music bigger presence, fell ill with pneumonia and died within a week. Willie was only 6 years old, and it was his first real experience with death. The loss cut deep. After the funeral, Willie and Bobby briefly saw their parents, but nothing changed. They stayed with their grandmother, living in harsh conditions. Winters were so cold that they pasted newspapers to the walls to keep heat inside the house. Still, Willie never saw himself as unlucky. He believed he had already received the greatest gift imaginable, the guitar his grandfather had given him just months earlier. His grandmother carried on where her husband left off. She kept Willie rooted in the Methodist Church and supported his creativity every step of the way. When she later passed away while Willie was still a teenager, the loss was devastating. But by then, he wasn't just a grieving kid anymore. He was already a working musician with a sense of direction and purpose. Willie started writing songs incredibly young. At just 7 years old, he penned his first original tune. For years, he brushed it off as too corny to talk about. But the inspiration behind it said music everything about who he was becoming. The song was sparked by the gold stars his grandmother gave him, and music, his sister, when they practiced their music. When one was taken away, Willie turned that small disappointment into a heartbreak song. Long before he knew real romantic pain, he was already writing about loss. By age 9, Willie was playing guitar professionally in a local PA band. His grandmother worried about the drinking at those gigs, but she recognized his passion and let him go. Music had its music hooks in him early, and it wasn't letting go. Still, he wasn't a one-track kid. In high school, Willie played football, basketball, and baseball, music, helped with farm work, and picked up every odd job he could find. Before fame ever found him, he worked as a phone operator, tree trimmer, pawn shop clerk, nightclub bouncer, saddle maker, and dishwasher. He stayed busy, restless, and curious. After high music school, he enlisted in the U.S. Air Force in 1950. That chapter didn't last long. Ongoing back problems led to an honorable discharge less than a year later. With no clear plan and very little money, Willie drifted. Eventually, he decided music to head to Portland, Oregon, to reunite with his mother. He had no cash and no ride. He tried hitchhiking, but when no one stopped, he spent the night sleeping in a ditch. The next day, he climbed onto a freight train and rode it as far as he could. Somewhere along the way, a kind truck driver, music, noticed him, gave him a few dollars for a bus ticket, and helped him finish the journey. After a few early swings at the music business ended in disappointment, Willie Nelson seriously considered walking away for good. He needed steady money. So he pivoted into sales, and surprisingly, he was great music at it. He went door-to-door selling Bibles and vacuum cleaners, eventually climbing the ladder to become a sales manager for an encyclopedia music company. On paper, it looked like a clean break for music. But music never really let him go. The moment Willie found himself singing for bar crowds again, the pull came rushing back. Before long, he landed a job at a small radio station called KBOP. By his own admission, he more or less talked his way into the job. His morning's music started early, often with a pounding headache from the night before. But the real prize was a daily 30-minute live slot where he could sing on the air. That's where he met Johnny Bush. The two connected immediately, formed a group, and began playing regularly at a local ballroom. Like most young bands, they leaned heavily on cover songs to keep crowds happy. One tune in particular always brought the house down, Yesterday. The only problem was that Willie had no idea it was already one of the biggest songs on the planet. He genuinely believed he had stumbled onto a little-known gem, completely unaware that the Beatles had just sold an impossible number of records. Years later, he would laugh at how confidently wrong he'd been. And somehow, he made the same mistake again. While touring in England years later, Willie heard a singer he thought was an exciting new discovery and became determined to track music him down. That artist turned out to be Julio Iglesias, who by that point had already sold millions of records in multiple languages. Willie had a talent for discovering stars, just slightly after the rest of the world did. Around this time, he also spent a stretch working as a guitar teacher at a local music school. It's almost surreal to think that there are people out there who once took lessons from Willie Music Nelson, never realizing they were being taught by a future legend. Even then, his own singing still wasn't turning heads. The real breakthrough came through his songwriting. That moment arrived when country star Farron Young heard Willie perform a song called Hello Walls. Farron immediately recognized its potential and decided to record it himself. That single decision changed everything. Suddenly, doors were opening. Before long, major artists like Roy Orbison, Patsy Cline, and Billy Walker were all recording Willie Nelson songs. In many ways, Willie's pen ended up being even more powerful than his voice. He wrote countless hits, but one song towers above the rest, Crazy. It would become one of the most iconic songs in country music history. But the way it found its way to Patsy Cline is wrapped in mystery, and Willie has told more than one version of the story. At the time, Music Patsy was recovering from a serious car accident. In one version, Willie plays the song for her husband and manager, Charlie Dick, late one night at a bar. Charlie is so blown away that he insists they go wake Patsy up immediately. Willie hesitates, not wanting to show up uninvited in the middle of the night, but Charlie pushes forward anyway. In another telling, Charlie is already a huge Willie fan and constantly plays his demos at home. Patsy, exhausted music and in pain, grows tired of hearing about this songwriter she's never met. When they finally arrive at the house, Willie supposedly stays hidden in the car to avoid an awkward confrontation, only coming inside once Patsy herself asks to meet him. Which version is true may never be clear. What is clear is that when Patsy finally took the song into the studio, it didn't come easy at first. She struggled with it and eventually stepped away for a few days. When she returned, something clicked. She delivered the final version in a single take, capturing a performance that would go on to define both her legacy and Willie's. Willie Nelson's breaking point. As Willie Nelson's career pressed on, he settled into a quiet ranch just outside Nashville, hoping for some peace after years of grinding through the industry. It was meant to be a refuge. Instead, it became the setting for one of the most infamous nights of his life. After returning home from a Christmas party, Willie found his house completely consumed by flames. By the time the fire was out, everything was gone. That night produced one of the most famous Willie Nelson stories of all time. While the house burned, he ran back inside to save a single possession, his marijuana stash. It sounds funny on the surface, but Willie's reasoning was serious. He wasn't just worried about losing his home. He was terrified that if firefighters found it, the police would be waiting. For him, the fire wasn't just destroying property, it threatened his freedom. That moment, combined with years of frustration in Nashville, finally broke him. Willie felt boxed in, burned out, and creatively drained. In 1972, he made a move that shocked the industry. He bought himself out of his contract, officially retired from music, and left Tennessee behind. He headed back to Texas, landing in Austin, determined to escape the Nashville system he'd been stuck in for nearly 2 decades. What Willie didn't realize was that he wasn't ending his career. He was about to begin the most important chapter of it. Austin changed everything. He dropped the clean-cut suits, the polished sound, and the industry rules. In their place came a rougher music edge, a freer spirit, and a style that finally sounded like the man himself. In 1973, he returned to the studio and released Shotgun Willie, the first album where critics truly took notice. Willie later said the record felt like it cleared his throat. It wasn't just a comeback. It was a declaration. That album laid the groundwork for what would become known as outlaw country, a movement that rejected Nashville polish in favor of honesty, grit, and independence. It also introduced one of Willie's most curious nicknames, Shotgun Willie. The name wasn't just clever branding. It came from a very real and very dangerous moment in his life. Willie's daughter, Lana, had been married to a man named Steve, who had a violent streak. When Willie stepped in to defend her, the music situation escalated fast. Steve followed Willie home and fired shots at the house. Willie responded by grabbing his music rifle and returning fire, sending the man running. The situation grew darker when Steve kidnapped his own son and threatened Willie directly. Instead of backing down, Willie prepared himself. When Steve drove by again, Willie ran out, fired at the car, and shot out a tire. In a twist that only adds to the legend, Steve later called the police on Willie. When officers arrived, Willie skipped the long explanation and told them the man must have driven over a bullet. Despite stories like that, Willie has long held strong views on gun control. He grew up around firearms and understood them well, but he drew a firm line. In his mind, basic firearms for protection and hunting were one thing. Weapons built for mass destruction were another. He believed no family needed those, period. By the mid-1970s, it was obvious Willie was on the edge of something big. The breakthrough finally arrived in 1975 with Red-Headed Stranger. It wasn't just an album. It was a full concept record telling a dark, haunting story that felt more like a novel set to music. Willie was 42 years old when it came out, proving that superstardom doesn't always arrive on schedule. The album delivered something Willie had never had before, a number music, one hit as a singer. Ironically, it wasn't even his own song. Blue Eyes Crying in the Rain, written decades earlier by Fred Rose, became his music first chart topper. After years of writing hits for everyone else, Willie finally stood at the top himself. Behind the scenes, though, things were getting complicated. In 1977, Willie fired the manager who had helped guide his rise. federal agents had intercepted a package the manager sent containing illegal substances. And to make matters worse, it was addressed to Waylon Jennings' office. On top of that, Willie accused him of financial misconduct and tax fraud. Music, the split was final and ugly. By then, Willie's reputation as the face of outlaw country was fully locked in. Alongside artists like Waylon Jennings, Jesse Coulter, and David Allan Coe, he represented a movement rooted in Austin, one that blended folk storytelling, rock attitude, and classic country sounds. They were rebels who refused to play by Nashville's rules. So it stunned almost everyone when Willie's next move was to record an album of old pop standards. Songs like Georgia, On My Mind, Moonlight in Vermont, and Stardust were the exact opposite of outlaw anthems. But the idea made perfect sense to Willie. The project grew out of a friendship with Booker T. Jones, the legendary producer and leader of Booker T. and the MGs. The two became neighbors in Malibu and spent nights sitting on their decks, casually playing the songs they loved growing up. Eventually, Willie suggested they stop jamming and record them properly. That decision led to Stardust, released in late 1977. Willie's label had little faith in it. They thought the album was too strange, too soft, and too risky. Their lack of confidence showed when they pressed only 500 copies for the initial release. 8 months later, Stardust went platinum. The album shattered genre boundaries and gave Willie something he had never truly had before: total creative freedom. Its success meant he no longer had to argue with record executives or justify his ideas.